Hi everyone, welcome to another session with Unique in His Image. Today our guest of honor, first of all, is Abba Father, our Creator, our King of Kings, and his very special vessel who will be speaking through the leading of his spirit today is Lechi van Rooyen from Hadassah Healing Oils. Thank you so much for your time today, Lechi, and for joining us. It's a privilege and an honor to have you here today.
Thank you, Lucia. I'm so excited for this recording. My surname have just changed to Lechi Kamffer. I'm still not used to it, but yeah, I'll get used to it.
Praise Abba for the honor of getting your husband's name. It's such a privilege and an honor. So Lechi, the first time I've met her was at one of her healing oil conferences, and from there, in the preparation of my wedding, she gave me some counsel and guidance on which oils to use in preparation. But this is the very first time that I will be hearing the detail of her journey, stepping into her calling in her ministry, Hadassah Healing Oils. So I'm just as excited as you are to hear the full detailed story. So thank you, Lechi. If you can just provide us a short introduction of who you are, and after that, just where your journey started.
Okay, so my name is Lechi. Everybody struggles to pronounce my name, and usually I get a lot of different spellings. I've had everything from Lechi to L'chaim, but my name actually comes from the Hebrew root word L'chaim, which means to life. So it's a celebration to life that the Jewish people say L'chaim, and Lechi comes from the root word of chai. So that is what my name means, and everything that I do and have done in Hadassah really is to bring life and to restore life, the fullness of life that Yeshua has given us back to his people and to his bride. So as a little girl, I can remember even having this massive desire within me to see how people live in the fullness for what the Lord created them to be, which is healing and health and restoration in their families and restoration in their workplaces and in their children. And the lack of that within people drove me into frustration for how is it possible that people who follow the Lord and love him, the church, at that time in my life as a child, we were in a normal NGO church. And I really struggled with the concept of how the people of God and the children of God were in so much bondage and slavery to what I'm just going to call death, and how they did not walk in the fullness of life. So, where other children usually spoke about netball and tennis and all of these normal things as a child, I really struggled to have a normal conversation with children about normal things in life, because I had a desire for the deeper, for more of the kingdom to be seen. Although in that time of my life, I had absolutely no idea that this was more of a prophetic gift that I had. So I grew up in a small town called Klerksdorp for almost my whole life. I recently moved just outside of George Hartenbos area to a farm in the mountains. We call it Mount Zion. It's a very, very special place where we are preparing to manufacture medicines and natural health supplements to the nations. And it's really a very big call of faith that we are just acting on in obedience. And we'll also be launching the guest house for Segula Guest House really soon in this week, which is everything that we're busy with on the farm. So currently I'm a Cape town girl, not a Klerksdorp girl. I had a lady tell me a few weeks ago, oh, so you're going to be a Kaapse meisie now. Ek sê Tannie, ek sal enige tyd 'n Kaapse meisie wees as 'n Klerksdorp meisie.
Yeah.
So So I came out of a very small town and never really, were in a city life. And I just had this massive desire to see people get healed from a very young age. When I was a young girl, I used to walk on my grandfather's farm and pick flowers and pick medicinal plants, and just started to create creams and tinctures and balms and oils. I had a big cabinet in my room with hundreds of different oils in. I don't think one of them were really pure, but I loved oils, and I loved to make a cream and to treat people with it, and to just see something happening in their body. So I believe that all of us really have a scroll within us, which is a life calling, or a scroll that is the purposes and the plans that God has for our lives. And some of those scrolls start at a very young age to open up, and some of them start later in your life, just like nobody is called at the exact same time in their life. Yeshua stepped into his calling at the age of 30, although he was born the Son of God. So all of us have a scroll and a book roll that the Father has written over your life. And he hasn't only written it over your life, he spoke it into creation. And that word that he spoke into creation is a living scroll. It has a living frequency inside of your DNA. It is who you are. And I hope that this teaching and this part of this recording, although it's very short and very small, might have an impact on somebody's life, to open up those seals on that scroll for what is written within the book of your life to be opened up, so that you can walk into what he has called you to do. So as a child, I knew one day, I always told everybody, one day when I grow up, I'm going to have a big health and healing retreat house. And in this house, there's going to be different treatment areas where we're going to treat people, and I'm going to be making natural medicine, and I'm going to have oils, and I'm going to have natural cosmetics, and all of these things in this house I knew as a little girl is what's going to be in there. So it was a prophetic gift that I had, let's just say that, as a child, knowing that one day when I grow up, I'm going to help people get healed.
Awesome.
And as everything in life, I don't think anybody can speak about something and have authority about something in their life if they hadn't gone through a testing or a process of the wilderness in their life to get authority over a certain subject. So I had to go through a massive season, a very long season in my life of testing and fire. And it started at the age of 13. I got born again, I got baptized, and, I started, I was filled with the Holy Spirit. I started speaking in tongues actually at a very young age already. And I thought life was perfect and the Lord is so good. That first love feeling of everything is just incredible. The sun is so super bright, and it's just the goodness of the Lord that is over you. And then after that, the wilderness starts and the testing starts in your life. And I don't think that most people who give their lives to the Lord are prepared for counting the cost that they know that they will go through a wilderness. And most of the time in the wilderness season, they lose faith and they lose hope and they lose trust. And they don't come out of the wilderness with, rarely they come out. Most of the time the season is much longer than it should be, but they don't really create the fruit and the character that the Lord wanted them to create in that season, because they lose sight of what is happening. And so at a very young age in my life, I went through a wilderness season at the age of 13, 14 years. And I got extremely sick. The same thing that I wanted to help people with getting healed and being healthy was one of the things that I had to overcome. So I got sick I lose track of time, but I think it was around the age of 14. And after 2 years, probably, of my mother taking me to every doctor, to every pastor, to every prophet in this country, nobody could really help me. And I didn't get any healing. And there was one specialist that told her, my symptoms, if I can just say that quickly, was extreme amounts of pain and
Mm.
extreme amounts of um, incredible pain that I couldn't manage at all. So I had in the mornings at 9 o'clock, I would basically pass out from the amount of pain that I had.
Yeah.
And I thought, yo, maybe it would be, if somebody can just tell me it's a brain tumor, I would have been so happy because then I knew what it was. So I had insane amounts of pain and I couldn't go to school anymore. I was laying in bed in the hospital, constantly going from physio to doctor to, on pethine drips, going to prayer sessions, going for deliverance, doing bloodlines, doing every single thing we knew how to do or what the Lord showed us to do, and nothing helped. And there was a time when I was so angry with the Lord, and I thought, how is it possible for a loving Father?
Mm.
How is it possible to take me through this or to allow this in my life, at such a young age? And I left school, I think, at the age of 16 because I couldn't, 15 or 16, I left school because I couldn't carry on. I didn't have the capacity in my physical body to carry on with school.
Mm.
And the amount of judgment and the amount of criticism and the amount of your words from the society around us was really very insane on that time of my life. And people told me, she's crazy, she's just trying to get attention. She isn't really sick, she's just trying to get attention.
And that on top of all the pain. Sure.
Yeah, so that was a really difficult time at a very young age to understand that my worth isn't within people.
Sure.
And if I look back at that now, and I'm 29 years old now, I would not change a thing. I would actually ask the Lord to, make the fire even more intense. Because if I didn't go through that, I would have never been able to have the character and to have the capacity and to have the maturity to do what I'm doing today. And so it is really, in that season, I would have wished it away, prayed it away, just asked the Lord for, instant healing. And, but now looking back, I actually realized that I wasted a lot of time in the wilderness that I could have used for something much better. So it was a really difficult season. And usually when I do conferences, I don't really go into the depth of how difficult that season was. I just tell the story about what I'm doing currently. But I think it's important for me to share how intense that season was because people don't understand the price that one pays for the amount of responsibility and trust that the Lord requires for us to have in ministry. I think people oftentimes look at people in ministry and look at people with great success or with great, whatever they're doing, and they are jealous or they think, oh, why can't I do this? Or a lot of people are jealous. I think that's the main thing. When you're anointed, there's a massive attack of jealousy on your life. But I don't think there's 5 people in my life that know how intense and how costly the price was that I had to pay. And that's really sad. I think it's a message that needs to be shared because it comes with a price. You have to calculate the price. You have to know that it is not going to be an easy road. It's not going to be quick. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy, but it is going to be worth it. It's going to be more than worth it. There is nothing that can compare to what the Lord does when you act in obedience. Nothing. No reward in an earthly realm can ever compare to what the Father does on obedience. Okay, so after that, after my season of intense wilderness, I left school. I forgot to say this, but a doctor told my mother, listen, your child will never be able to get matric. You're going to have to make peace with it. You just make sure her life is very comfortable. She needs to manage her pain. You make sure she's comfortable. Don't put too much stress on her because it's gonna increase the pain. And he said, I don't believe she will ever be able to get me drink. And so at that time, my mother really started seeking the Lord's face. And we wrote a book about that season of our lives, which was really incredible, but it was very intense. And it's called in Afrikaans, Met my God spring ek oor 'n muur. It's a book that my mom, Christa van Rooyen, wrote. And it speaks about the process of how to get healing and how does healing start and what is true healing and where are the roots of healing within your soul and within your spirit that is keeping you, where are the roots of sickness within the soul and within the spirit that is keeping you in a place of bondage. And just our process through walking through different sicknesses and different diseases and how we got healed from that. Which are, there's so many testimonies from our own family. So not only I had to go through healing, my mother got healed from 35 years of epilepsy, from a lot of chronic autoimmune disorders like lupus. And all of these are characterized as untreatable or not unhealed or how do I say this in English? This is a chronic illness. You'll never be able to get healing from it. You're going to be chronically on medication for the rest of your life if you are diagnosed with something like epilepsy or lupus. Okay, so we went through a lot of testimonies and we're still going through a lot of healing journeys and testimonies in and around my family. And I got healed about a year after that. And when people ask me, what was it that you got healing from? Was it the bloodline prayers or was it, the deliverance, or was it the oils, or was it your diet? What was it that caused your healing? And it was all of it. It wasn't one thing. It was a process. It was the process of walking it out. It was the process of creating that character within me. It was a process of all of it together. And all of it together caused my body to come into alignment with healing.
I think
so.
I think it's so important that you share this. And also, if we go through a wilderness period in our life, in that wilderness period, you can either waste the time or you can allow Abba to form your character. You can allow him to shape you so that when you come out of the wilderness period, you are the character that he wants you to be. You can get that healing. You can step into that journey in boldness. But if we waste the time while we are in the wilderness, then the wilderness period is just going to be so much longer and it's just going to keep on dragging out because we don't allow him to shape and form us. So why I'm mentioning this is that it's so awesome to me that you are saying that it's all of that yield you, because you had to persevere through it all. You had to do everything that Abba asked you to do. You had to be obedient in it all to get to that point of healing.
Absolutely. And I think if we can actually name this recording, it would be good to say, don't waste the time in the wilderness, because that is more precious than gold. Don't waste what the Lord is creating within you in the wilderness. Do not spend your time in the wilderness unwisely, because it's going to get even longer. Absolutely. The wilderness is one of the most special places to be in, because that is where everything within you gets formed for what he has promised you, for what he is going to do within the promised land. And you'll see throughout your whole life, it's going to be a wilderness period and a promised land period, a wilderness period and a promised land period, because you will never be able to have the capacity for what he is doing in the promised land if you don't go and overcome the wilderness, go through and overcome the wilderness. Okay, so I went through that process of healing, and I started doing homeschooling, and I got my matric from homeschooling. So I basically left school in grade 10, if I'm correct. And for the last few years, I did homeschooling. And I think I want to stop and just share a bit about this, because that was one of the most special times of my life. And I think I actually did homeschooling in primary school as well. And then I went back to university because to to high school. I'm going through all of my life stages now. I went back to high school because I wanted to feel normal. You know, in primary school, I just want to backtrack quickly on this topic. In primary school, I begged my parents to put me or to let me do homeschooling because I could not fit in with society. And thank the Lord they allowed me to do homeschooling for those years in primary school, because that really allowed me to just become who I am at a very young age. And the system, which is the normal school system, I really struggled my whole life to be able to conform to a system. And if you're not mature and you look out of it out of a fleshly viewpoint, you're going to be comparing yourself with others constantly and feeling, why am I not the same? Why doesn't my life look the same? Why is this not happening to me as well? You know, so nothing in my life was normal. And now I only realize that it is because I'm not the normal cookie cutter recipe, and you are also not the normal cookie cutter recipe. So I could never just fit into any system. The Lord always took me out of all systems because he didn't want me to conform to the system. And I used to kick against it for a long time because I thought, but what about people? And I didn't understand what he was busy doing. So in primary school, he took me out of the system. In high school, he took me out of the system. And the reason for that is, if I were to stay in that system, I wouldn't have the mindset and I wouldn't have the character that I had, because I would have had the mindset of the system. I want to say this in much respect, but you know, the outlook on life. And when he takes you out of a system, he starts giving you a fresh perspective, and he starts giving you an absolute different way at looking at something. It's called the eagle's viewpoint. And that's what he wants to do. He wants you to see far, not close. So in high school, he also took me out of the system and I did homeschooling. And in those 3 years of homeschooling, it was an absolute life-changing time for me. I didn't have any influences from people. He revealed so many things to me. He started opening up my prophetic gifting. He started speaking to me. You know, it was just a very, very special time. And at the end of that season of matric, I had to decide where I was going to study. And I knew the following, you know, everybody tells me, how do I know what is my calling? How do I know what the Lord has called me to do? You usually don't know the fullness of it when you're still young, because he will not reveal it if you don't have the maturity for it. You usually do know a bit of it, you know, pieces of it, but not the fullness of it. So at the end of my matric year, I needed to decide where I was going to study. And for my whole life, I had a really big desire to create medicine, natural medicine. That was like the main thing that I wanted to do. And the path that I created for myself to do that was to go and study pharmacy, and then to do my, you know, post-grad degree in pharmaceuticals, and then to go further and to study into natural medicines, and then I would be able to manufacture natural medicine. So that was my idea, my 10-year plan, but it definitely wasn't the Lord's 10-year plan. And so I went to study pharmacy because I knew I was called to make medicine. I never knew how it would turn out, but you know, that was what I did in obedience. And I was one of the first students to be accepted at the university. I think a lot of people have a fear that if they do homeschooling, they won't be able to get into university, and that's not the truth. If you have a good homeschooling degree, certificate or matric certificate. Mine was international. Then usually it's really easy to get into university. So I got accepted, and out of this very safe space in my house, with me and the Lord and my parents, I went into university, and it was a bomb shock on me, everything that I encountered there. And in my first year, I was very focused on my studies. I never went to any party or club or anything. I've never even been to, any party. I don't even know what you call it these days, but a kayak. And I was really focused on my studies. And in my second year, the Lord started to speak much, much more to me than in my first year. He kind of left me out in my first year to just find my feet.
Okay.
And the second year, I really started to hear the voice of the Lord immensely, in such a big way that in the beginning of my third year, I actually went to my father to tell him, I feel like the Lord is calling me to be a prophet to the nations. Yeah. And I feel like I need to stop studying because of this intense prophetic revelations that I started getting and opening up of the prophetic realm. And it was really intense, Lucia. I mean, it was really intense. I would sit in class at university, but I had a deep desire for the Lord. Nothing could come to the desire and to the hunger that I had for the Lord. And so I would sit in class and I would know that the Father is going to start speaking now. And I would run out of my class into my little apartment to go and sit in my bedroom because I knew he was going to start speaking. And it was really an incredible, incredible season of the Lord just drawing me in and starting to reveal a lot of things to me. So I got very involved in ministry. I got very involved in different types of ministries I'm not going to go into that, but I studied and I was in ministry at the same time. So I had these two things, and I constantly felt like the Lord is going to, he's going to put me in full-time ministry. That is really what I felt. And I think there's a lot of people that feels that the Lord is calling them for full-time ministry. And they're in a situation, I would just say a new or a fresh relationship with the Lord, feeling that they are called for full-time ministry. Not that, I just feel like some of the people in their fresh relationship with the Lord have this very overwhelming feeling that they're called for full-time ministry. And I had that feeling. So my father, he was so gracious and kind. And I really struggled in studying pharmaceuticals and pharmacy and pharmaco, and having the revelations that the Lord showed me about what the truth is. How does medicine really look like? What is medicine supposed to do? What is medicine supposed to be? Who is the Father, and how is the body functioning? So at the one in one area, or at the one part of the page, I learned pharmaceuticals and the pharmacy way of doing medicine. And at the other part of the page, I had this deep downloads from the Lord out of what medicine really are. And the two completely crashed. It literally was the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I struggled to go through that. It was really difficult for me to study material and to work in a pharmacy and to give people medication and to go on with normal life and normal systems while understanding these deep, profound revelations that the Lord started sharing with me. And it really felt like I was suffocating in the system, if I can just say it really, plainly. And please, this is not about doctors or anybody in any medical industry. It's just my story. So I don't want anybody to take this out of context. This is just my testimony. I struggled in the system. I really desired to see more of the Lord. And I really struggled to fit into this system that I knew is not working because there's not fruit on it. And in my third year, I really, really felt like the Lord is calling me out of the system. And so I was obedient. I went to my father. I told him, I really feel like I need to get out of the system. And he said, it's fine. And I stopped studying. For a whole year, I stopped studying. And in that year, I went home, I sat with the Lord. There was so many other things that I started doing. I started studying natural product formulations and a lot of different things that I just felt the Lord is pressing on my heart. And I really felt like the Lord has taken me out of the pharmaceutical, or let's just say the pharmakeia system. I really felt like he has taken me out of it. I'm done. He's called me to ministry and this is what I'm going to do. And in that time, Lucia, this was in end of November. I mean, it's ridiculous to even ask a university at the end of November if you're going to come back to study. Yeah. And at the end of November, I had 3 dreams. Yeah. All of them, every single night for 3 days, I had 3 dreams, and the Lord told me, you need to go back and you need to finish your studies. After fully being convinced that I'll never return to that system, And I was completely baffled. I was like, I don't understand. How would he call me out, but then again call me in? How can you tell Isaac, okay, you need to go, Abram, you need to go and offer your son. And then when he's there, tell him, okay, no, this is not what you're going to do. And I so much of his character in that, because he just asked us to be obedient. He did ask me to get out of it, and he did ask me to return. But he wants to see if you are obedient, and he wants to test the measures of obedience that you will go through. And so after 3 days, I messaged the university and I told him, please, can I just return to finish my studies? And I thought, it's going to be impossible. How are they going to let me just continue with my studies? Yeah. It really is a massive testimony. And I just stepped in the next year, continued with my semester. Okay, so I was in my 3rd year. And while studying, I still had this ministry thing going on. And I struggled so much in the next 3.5 year cycle. So I studied for 3.5 years. The Lord took me out. 3 years. The Lord took me out, and I had another session, another cycle of studies. Okay. And in my 1st and 2nd year, I really got like very high grades, like very, very high grades, because I'm quite I think I am quite an intelligent human being. But in my 2nd return to university, I struggled immensely to get through my subjects. I couldn't understand why, because I was really being obedient. I was really studying. I really tried, but it was like pharmakeia knew. And it was like the spirit of pharmakeia was against me. Because just before returning to university, the Lord called me. And I think I missed saying this. This is a really important marking of my life and where everything started. So just before I returned, the Lord, I was not in South Africa, I was in a country in Africa. And the Lord woke me up in the middle of the night. And he spoke to me in such a way. I've never had him speak to me like that again. It was really a once-in-a-lifetime encounter. I think it's the way Moses encountered him when he revealed the blueprint of the tabernacle. There are some encounters that happen in your life that really, it happens very few times, but it changes and it impacts every single thing after that. And this was one of those encounters. And it was an encounter where the Lord called me as Esther. And he woke me up in the middle of the night, and I physically, well, it was a night vision, but I woke up from it and I was crying for weeks on end of the impact that it made on my spirit. And so he told me, he called me by my name, and then he told me, I'm going to give you a crown.
Sure.
And I was like, wow, I'm going to get a crown, you know?
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then he told me, I'm going to give you a crown. He said, Hadassah, are you listening? And he was extreme, you know, his voice was so real that I could feel his voice going through every single cell in my body. And then he told me, I'm going to give you a crown. It has 7 pearls and 7 almonds in it. And then he said it again. It has 7 pearls and 7 almonds. And when he said it, he gave me a bunch of red roses. And I woke up of the night vision and I was like weeping of what I encountered. And he called me as Esther.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, I just received a crown, you know? And I never understood. I only understood that I actually was making the crown only in the 7th year of this process. So at that moment, the Lord opened up my scroll and my calling, and everything in the spirit knew. So this is why the second return to university was that difficult, because everything in the spirit knew the anointing and the calling that was on my life.
Yeah.
So I just clarify that part. And so the 7 pearls actually refers to 7 years, and it was 7 years that I had to go through from that moment to make and to create 7 pearls that is placed within the crown. Sure. And then after the 7 pearls comes 7 almonds, and I'm currently in the first year of the 7 almond season, of the 7 years of the almond. And I just refer to it as the 7 years of the almond and the 7 years of the pearl, because it really is, it's not only a word for me, this is a word for the body of Christ. You know, I've never really taught on it, but it is a process that is being walked out in the body of Christ. So what is really special is I got married exactly 7 years and 10 months after this word was given to me. And in Esther, you would read that she went to the king the 10th month of her 7th year, in the 7th year.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so in the 7th year, I was so frustrated with the Lord, because I asked him, Father, you told me it's 7 years. It's 7 years, and your time is up. And you know, I don't see you doing anything. I was so frustrated. And then he gave me that scripture, and I realized that the Lord's 7 years are always 8 years, because in the 8th year, the unfolding comes for what he has done in the 7 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
So, Lucia, I think we're going to do more than 2 recordings. Okay, so I went back to university.
Sorry,
and I really
ask the almonds. Can you just give us a bit more explanation regarding that?
Okay, so the 7 years of the pearls, obviously, when I received the crown in my, you know, in my spirit being, so this was literally a life-changing encounter. I have no words to explain it. It was, he called me, and you know, you can just say your name and everything changes. Everything in your life will change if he just says your name. It has such a big impact on your spirit when he calls you, because everything in you instantly changes to the sound of his voice. And that was an absolute life-changing day in my life. I mean, if I could encounter him every single night like that, it would be amazing, you know. I just don't think people understand the effect that his voice has on you. You know, so many people are really hungry for the Lord, but they are busy with nothing from Him. You just really need one touch and one encounter with Him, and it really changes everything. Okay, let me focus. The 7 years of the pearl speaks about, it speaks about 7 years of hiddenness, 7 years of darkness. Because a pearl gets created and made within darkness, within hiddenness, you know. And it gets made through incredible frustration and pressure and things that are constantly just wrijven. Hoe kan ek dit nou sê in Engels? There's so many things in those 7 years that I had to go through that the Lord did in hiddenness, but out of that He revealed the pearls. And it was very painful, and it was very costly. It was truly very costly. You know, the parable where Yeshua said, if a man finds this pearl, he will sell everything for it. And the cost of those pearls being created in the spirit and the authority that they carry are very, very, very high. And so I had to go through these 7 years. That was very tough. It was very intense. It was a high price. I had to struggle through seasons where I really thought, Lord, are you hearing any of my prayers? You know, because what are you busy with? And what I can tell you now, being in the first year of the almond, is that He cannot He cannot say anything and it will return void. He is the most faithful person that you would ever encounter. He is faithful. He is true. He is so faithful. And He cannot speak a word and it returns void. So out of those 7 years of forming the pearls, 7 pearls, again, I would choose it any day. If I knew what I know now, I would have just enjoyed it more. But it was such a special time of the Lord really enlarging my capacity, in, you know, just maturing me and getting me to a place for what He wants to do. Okay, so the pearls speak about actually being hidden, not revealed, and what the Lord does in hiddenness for us to be revealed. But also the pearls are what the gates of the New Jerusalem are made out of. And the pearls and the process of forming the pearls is what opens up the gates to what He wants to do in the next season. The gates of the next season will not open if you don't go through the seasons for creating the pearl. It's just what it is. And also the gates of the nations and the gates of the 12 tribes and the gates of the bride that she goes through in Revelations, the 12 gates of Zion, is made up of the pearls. And the pearls and the process, remember, you cannot go through a gate in the spirit if you don't have authority and if you didn't overcome some things. So the bride has to go through all 12 of those gates. The bride of Christ is the one who will go through intense frustration and pain and pressure, because out of that she forms pearls for the gates to open up. So the 7 years of the pearl, you know, was in a nutshell that. And then the almond speaks about the promise of the Lord and the word of the Lord coming into fulfillment. So in Jeremiah 1, you know, the father speaks to Jeremiah and he tells him, Jeremiah, what are you seeing? And he says, I'm seeing an almond blossom. And he said, and this is what it would be. No word will return void, and the word that I have sent out will do what I have called it to do, or what I have spoken it to do. So the 7 years of the almond speak about the fulfilling of the promises of the Lord, the fulfilling of the word that he has spoken to us.
And you are literally living it and seeing it, and how awesome is our Abba Father.
Yeah, Lechi, I think I have a very prophetic life. And it took me 29 years to realize my life is extremely prophetic, and the way I walk things out and the seasons in my life are extremely prophetic for the bride. And at this time, I can just tell you, this is really a word for everybody. It's not only my life. I'm just a prophetic walking out of it. That, you know, everything that happens in my life is extremely prophetic. So I can see the fulfillment of it, and it is so good, and it is so incredible. I could have never dreamed about anything like what he has done and what he is currently doing. So the 7 years speaks about the fulfillment of the promises, the almond, but it's also much more than that. You know, we can look at the menorah, which is made out of the almond tree. There's so many mysteries and deep hidden things about the almond, but that's a teaching on its own. But you know, it's a whole teaching on its own. And in the dream, in the encounter, Lucia said, and that was, I mean, I think that was 9 years ago. I have no idea, 8 or 9 years ago. At that stage of my life, I didn't even know anything prophetically about the almond or about the pearl. I just had this encounter. Okay, so after that, I went back to university. Everybody's on the same page. You're gonna have to stop me. And I really struggled to get through my subjects. I really struggled specifically with one subject. And one day I was crying, so frustrated with the Lord. And I was sitting on my bunk, my couch, and in my little apartment with, you know, I just studied for 2 months on this one subject and I didn't pass it. And I was crying, sitting on my couch with books all over me. And I said to the Lord, I am not gonna get off of this couch if you do not speak to me now. And I asked him, Father, you know, I'm doing all of this. I'm sacrificing my life. I'm doing all of this in obedience. I'm doing everything that you have asked me to do. And I need you to tell me why it's not working. I need you to tell me what am I doing wrong, because what you have asked of me, I've done, and I'm not seeing any fruit. And that was the second wilderness that I had to go through in my life. That's 7 years. And again, I was immediately, you know, I had an encounter with the Lord, and he was very faithful to speak with me while I was so frustrated. And I was literally out of my body. And again, these are not encounters that I have every single day, but when they happen, it absolutely changes everything in your life. And I had an encounter. I was literally taken out of my body. I was in heavenly places. I don't know where. And he spoke to me and he told me the following. He said to me, Lechi, I am going to give you the greatest gift that I could ever give you. And he told me, I am going to give you time. And then he told me, what will you do with it? And that again, it resonated within my spirit so deeply. And I knew that what the Father is busy doing is something that I do not understand now, but he's giving me time. Okay, so he told me, I'm going to give you time. What will you do with it? And then he left it. And he said one more thing, and I came out of the encounter. He said, my darling, I need you to look. Oh no, he said, from now on, I'm going to call you a name. And he told me the name. And when I looked at the meaning of the name, it means to look like an eagle, to see and to have vision like an eagle, to have an eagle's vision. And when I came out of the encounter, he told me, I need you to look at the season out of my eyes and not out of your own, because you are looking at the season here and I'm looking much farther, and I see much farther than you are seeing now. And I got out of that encounter and I realized that what the Lord is giving me now, even though it seemed like a curse to me, is a gift. Mm-hmm. Even though it seemed like an incredible, frustrating season, He's actually giving me a gift. Mm-hmm. And that the gift that He wants to give me is time. Mm-hmm. And I started completely changing the way that I looked at the season. And in that season, I started Hadassah Healing Oils, which is my ministry currently, just out of faithfulness, because I had time. And I was still studying, and the Lord released me into full-time ministry while I was studying. And so I did my first teaching conference, and I think I did 1 or 2 conferences over 2 weekends, and I was fully booked for the next year, every single weekend, over the whole country, you know. And I never thought I was starting a business. Never. Mm-hmm. I knew I was called for ministry. I knew the Lord is asking me to teach and to teach people about how medicine is actually supposed to work. Yeah. And I knew that the Lord is calling me to help people. This was just before COVID and within COVID. So there was a lot of things that the Lord wanted to release to His people to equip them for the season that was lying ahead of them. And I was just faithful in it. So I went, you know, did a teaching, start helping out. Before that, I started helping people, just people who were sick and needed healing, and I started mixing for them and helping them and treating them. And when COVID hit the country, the Lord told me I need to get in my car and drive. And I was on a road trip teaching, ministry trip for 9 weeks in the middle of COVID, teaching all over South Africa, while going through every single police stop without a permit and without a license on the car that I was borrowing to teach in. And not one police officer stopped me, because the covering of the Lord was over me, because He has asked me to do it in that season. And it was an incredible, incredible time of my life. But it also was very intense and it was very costly. And He told me beforehand, He said to me, you are going to go through a season in your life where you will live out of your bags. Are you okay with it? And He first asked me, before He released me into teaching, He asked me if I was willing to pay the price of what it would take to do this. And in that time, I didn't know the fullness of the price. I also just said, okay, that's exciting, you know. Obviously, He knew what the price would be, because He asked me, are you willing to live out of your bag for the season? And I didn't know how long the season was going to be either. It was much longer than I thought. And I was like, yes, Lord, I would do it. Absolutely. Just send me. Just send me where you want me to go. And then He told me the most beautiful thing. He told me, I promise you, if you are willing to do this, that I would give you a house in every area of this country. And that really is, you know, the truth. I have like family and houses and friends and people where I ministered in every single town almost in this country. But first He asked me if I was willing to do it, and I could have said no, and He would have given it to somebody else. And if I wasn't obedient, He would have given it to somebody else. And if I didn't do what He has asked me to do, you know, I wouldn't have the privilege and the blessing to eat of the fruit of it today. So Hadassah Healing Oils never came out of a place of I'm starting a business. Never. I didn't even know it was a business. I thought in full-time ministry, you know? And I thought, okay, this is what ministry looks like. And I had to go through a long process to understand the difference between a kingdom business and a ministry. And combining the two of each other for this to be functional and for this to be, to do what the Lord has called it to do in the nations, because it has a big ministry side and it has a business leg as well.
Sure, Leisha. I think also what you said about the eagle's view, if you didn't put on that view initially when he told you to, and once again, in your human perspective, you put on an eagle's view, but his view extended even further because he knew the fullness of this calling. But you put on this eagle's view and you stood in obedience. You stood from a place of willingness to go out to the nations, to proclaim his word, to take up your mission, even though there was so many uncertainties, even though you stepped into the unknown. And I think that is so beautiful about when you truly step into your calling in boldness, it really means to step into something without an inch of doubt that Abba Father will carry you through it. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that it's going to go without challenge. It just means that you need to step into trust, perseverance, and faith. And the reward that he's given you is so much bigger. But I know from previous conversations with you that you did not do it out of a place of, yes, but the reward is going to be big. You did it out of a heart of a desire for your King because you want to be obedient to him, because you love him in abundance. And that is so beautiful.
Yes, I don't think you can ever do it out of a heart for the reward. You're never gonna know what the reward is gonna be. You just follow him day by day, and you just have your view and your eyes focused on him. And in time, all of that gets revealed. So I think if we can just maybe wrap up this session because it already is quite lengthy. It's so important to not get stuck in a system and to trust that the Lord will do with your life what he wants to do with your life.
Sure.
And it is so difficult in that same, it's really difficult to take a step of faith out of a system and to say, okay, Father, but I'm going to trust you with whatever you want to do with my life. But it always is so worth it. So I think I would like to just encourage the people that are listening to this that don't waste time in the wilderness. If I didn't have that encounter with him telling me, you have the greatest gift and it is time, I would have wasted that time. I would have wasted it. The time that he gives us in that season is so precious. And I actually don't think that I could have used that time that he gave me any better or any more productively, because I was so focused on what he told me and I didn't waste a minute. I was teaching and traveling and ministering, and I created the whole factory for Hadassah Healing Oils, the whole system for Hadassah Healing Oils. I mean, I think I had more than 200 conferences that I had in that time. I think we reached and helped more than 30,000 people. The effect that it had while we were in COVID was immense. It really was just mind-blowing and absolutely above human to do what we did, or to do what, what the Lord did actually in that time, because I really truly believe that Hadassah Healing Oils was not established by man. It really was established by the Lord. I did work extremely hard and I did do everything He showed me to do, but He established it. And He was the one that put everything in place as it went along. So, you just need to be faithful in everything He's telling you in that day. Just be faithful with the small things and He does the rest. He really, if He wants to establish something, He establishes it through somebody that would be obedient to Him. So in that time, I would say it was the last 5 years of the 7-year cycle. The time after that encounter, and that encounter also only happened, I think, in the 2nd or in the 3rd year after He called me. My view on everything changed, and I started taking every second that I had in that season to be obedient through what He had called me, not to wait and to see that He would do it, but to do it myself, to do it. I think a lot of people, the Lord is putting something on their hearts or calling them to something, and then they just wait. The Lord will, it's like, we're gonna all just sit and wait for Yeshua to return to fix every problem and everything we're struggling with. It is, there's a lot of people who just says, okay, but the Lord has called me to do this, and then they just wait on Him forever and ever and ever, and they waste so much time, because you need to do something. You need to be faithful. If you are faithful in a little, He will do the rest. But you need to step out and you need to do what He has asked you to do. And you need to do that in faith and boldly. And in that process, you see, okay, wow, look at what He has done. I brought a little bit to the picture, and He brought the rest of the picture. It's like baking a bread for a meal and bringing it to a meal, and the table is laid with food, and you had one bread that you baked, but you are eating off a feast of a table that the Lord has prepared for you.
Absolutely.
But if you didn't bake one bread, you can't participate in this meal. So please don't waste that time, because that time the Lord has given to equip you, to prepare you, to train you, to mature you for what He is actually calling you to do.
Amen. Thank you, Lechi, and thank you for sharing that. And as you said in the beginning, we each have our own scroll, and we each have a calling upon our lives. It's a matter of being willing to listen to Abba when He calls you, and being willing to trust Him and walking in obedience with Him to step into that calling. And I'm so excited also for you to share a bit more in part 2 of this series about the difference between business and kingdom, ministry and kingdom, or ministry and business, and going into a bit more detail of that. But thanks for your time today, and see you next time.
It's a pleasure.